The city wakes like a restless dream, horns blaring, engines rumbling, vendors calling out prices from roadside stalls. Sunlight creeps slowly across the skyline, gilding the glass towers in soft gold. Lagos, the city of dreams, beats with a rhythm that feels alive, full of hope, ambition, and silent hunger. Beneath every smile lies a secret, behind every handshake, a deal waiting to be made. Camera sweeps over crowded streets, mothers balancing baskets on their heads, young men in suits rushing to offices, and children chasing each other through puddles that glisten with the first light. Amid all this motion, one hill stands apart, high above the chaos, glimmering in quiet arrogance. Perched on that hill is the Okafor mansion, a monument to success and separation. Its marble walls shine white against the haze, its glass windows catching sunlight like judgmental eyes watching the city below. From a distance, it looks like paradise. Up close, it feels like a fortress. The driveway curves through gardens too perfect to be natural, every flower trimmed, every fountain whispering of wealth earned through decades of sacrifice. Yet, inside those walls, the air feels heavy, like something beautiful but broken. Chief Obinna Okafor, the man behind the empire, stands before a mirror in his private chamber. His reflection shows power wrapped in wrinkles, strength buried beneath exhaustion. His cane rests beside him, carved wood with gold inlay, a symbol of triumph that now feels more like a burden. Once a street vendor shouting prices under the blazing Onitsha sun, he built a company that shaped the skyline of Lagos itself. But tonight, as he adjusts the cuff of his silked bata, the glow of accomplishment feels hollow. His eyes, once sharp with ambition, now search for something softer, something he lost along the way. Downstairs, the household prepares for his 68th birthday dinner, not a celebration of life, but a performance of perfection. Adaora, his daughter, walks through the marble halls in a sequin dress, her phone raised high as she live streams to thousands of followers. "Family dinner tonight," she says with a polished smile. Celebrating the legend himself. Behind the screen, her expression fades into indifference. She scrolls through comments about her makeup, not the man she's supposed to honor. Chike, the son, speaks loudly from the living room, his Bluetooth headset blinking like a signal of distraction. "Yes, finalize the deal before midnight," he says, pacing past family portraits without looking at them. His tone is sharp, his focus elsewhere, in a world of stocks, numbers, and power. He pauses only when he catches his reflection in the mirror, straightens his suit, and walks toward the dining hall. Ngozi, Obinna's wife, moves with elegance learned from years of pretending everything is fine. Her jewelry sparkles like armor, her perfume fills the corridors long before she enters a room. She instructs the servants with calm precision but never glances toward her husband's study. Love between them had become something to be remembered, not lived. In the midst of all this preparation, two figures move quietly, Mama Titi, the elderly housekeeper, and Moses, the loyal driver. They speak little, but their eyes say everything. Mama Titi wipes a table, her hands trembling slightly, then looks toward Obinna's closed door with worry. "He doesn't smile anymore," she murmurs. Moses nods, carrying a tray of tea. "The rich man's laughter costs him too much," he replies softly. Their words carry the truth no one else dares to say. Night descends like velvet over the mansion, and the grand dining table gleams beneath chandeliers that spill golden light onto polished silverware. The family gathers, their smiles wide, their laughter loud. Adaora angles her camera discreetly, capturing moments for her online followers. Chike discusses market shares even as the meal is served. Ngozi raises a glass to her husband, to the man who built our empire. The toast echoes, polite and hollow. Obinna nods faintly but does not drink. He watches them instead, his family, his blood, yet strangers in spirit. The laughter rings in his ears like a song he no longer recognizes. As the dinner fades into night, Obinna retreats quietly to his study. The air smells of old books and cedar wood. He sits heavily, staring out at the city lights below, the empire he built, shimmering and alive. Voices drift in from the corridor. Adora's tone cuts sharp through the silence. He's getting old, Chike. You know he won't handle the company much longer. Chike's reply is colder. That's why we need to plan ahead. If he hands control to someone else, everything could crumble. Ngozi's voice joins softly, tiredly. He will leave it to you both. Just, don't let him know you're discussing this. Obinna freezes. Each word pierces deeper than the last. He leans forward, heart pounding, as realization dawns, the empire he sacrificed everything for has bred greed, not gratitude. His children, his pride, are plotting like vultures circling a still-living body. The gold of success turns black in his mind. He presses a hand to his chest, his breath shallow, not from illness but from heartbreak. For a moment, the old man looks smaller than his shadow. He sits there long after their footsteps fade, surrounded by the ticking of clocks and the faint hum of city traffic. The silence is unbearable, until Mama Titi appears, holding a cup of warm tea. She notices his trembling hands and kneels beside him. "Chief, are you all right?" she asks gently. He tries to smile but fails. She places the cup on the table and studies his face, then says in her calm, motherly voice. "If you want to know who loves you, disappear when they need you most." Her words hang heavy in the air, not advice, but prophecy. Obinna turns to the window again. The city below still glows, restless, beautiful, unaware. Neon signs flicker like dying stars. He sees the glass towers reflecting his mansion's light and realizes that everything he owns is built on reflections, surfaces that shine but show no soul. His empire has walls of marble but hearts of emptiness. He takes a deep breath and whispers to himself, "Then I will disappear." When dawn returns, soft and gold, the camera finds him standing at the edge of his balcony. The city hums awake beneath him, cars honking, people shouting, life beginning again. His eyes, once full of pride, now hold a quiet resolve. He knows what he must do. Not to punish, but to reveal. Not to destroy, but to understand. He will pretend to be dying. He will watch who stands beside him when there is no empire left to defend. The test of love will begin, not in boardrooms or parties, but in silence and truth. As the light shifts from amber to deep blue, Obinna steps back into the mansion, his silhouette framed by the vast skyline. The wind moves through the open curtains, carrying the faint sound of church bells from the distant city below. In that moment, he is no longer the man who built an empire, he is the man who seeks to rebuild his soul. The screen fades slowly, leaving behind the image of a city reflected in glass, beautiful, fragile, and full of unspoken stories. The night air over Lagos feels heavy, humming with restless lights and the distant echo of horns. Inside the Okafor mansion, Chief Obinna stands before the glass wall of his study, his reflection merging with the city skyline that stretches endlessly below. His breath fogs the window slightly as he whispers, "So this is what power feels like, empty." His gold cufflinks gleam under dim light, symbols of victories that now taste like ash. The hum of generators from far below seems to pulse with the rhythm of his guilt. He knows what he's about to do will change everything. Behind him, papers lie scattered, medical reports, handwritten letters, and one unsigned confession. He isn't dying, but the lie he's preparing will make the world believe he is. He gazes at his reflection one last time before saying softly, "Let's see who stays when the music stops." At the edge of Surulere, in a small private clinic bathed in flickering fluorescent light, Dr. Aluko listens in silence as Obinna makes his request. The two men, bound by years of friendship and business, now face a moral line drawn in sand. "You want me to lie, Chief?" the doctor asks, his hands trembling slightly as he removes his glasses. "You want me to forge death into truth?" Obinna's eyes glisten. "Not death, my friend, revelation." Aluko looks down at the medical form, its empty spaces waiting to be filled with deceit. "This could destroy everything you built." Obinna nods slowly. "Then let it." What's the point of an empire if it's built on hearts that no longer beat for you? The doctor hesitates, then signs. The sound of pen against paper seals a pact born of sorrow. Within days, whispers spread through the city. In boardrooms across Lagos, the news hits like thunder. Chief Okafor is terminally ill, someone murmurs. The information travels fast, through WhatsApp groups, gossip blogs, and hushed conversations over champagne lunches. Business partners feign sympathy while secretly recalculating investments. At the headquarters of Okafor Holdings, the man's portrait still hangs high, but his chair sits empty. Board members exchange nervous glances, each already plotting their next move. Obinna, once the voice that silenced rooms, now retreats into absence, his legacy dissolving into rumor and pity. The mansion itself begins to feel haunted. Chandeliers flicker, not from power failure but from the weight of silence. Credit cards are cancelled. Cars remain parked under sheets of dust. Laughter dies in hallways once filled with music. The empire, once vibrant, now feels like a tomb dressed in velvet. Ngozi wanders through rooms clutching her robe tighter each night, while Adora posts pictures captioned, "Pray for my father," against soft piano tracks. Each post gathers thousands of likes, her followers mourning a man they never knew. She cries before her ring light, mascara shimmering under artificial tears. The sympathy becomes her new kind of fame. Across the ocean, Chike scrolls through the news feed on his tablet in a London penthouse overlooking the Thames. His jaw tightens. "He's dying," he mutters. The reflection in his glass window shows a man torn between grief and opportunity. He books the next flight home, but not before printing out a stack of legal papers, partnership transfers, ownership clauses. He packs them neatly beside his suits. When his assistant asks, "Should I send flowers?" Chike replies flatly, "No. Send the documents." Back in Lagos, Ngozi pours tea with slow, trembling hands. Her geli is perfectly tied, her expression unreadable. She tells herself she is calm, but her eyes reveal the truth, years of bitterness hardening behind civility. She glances at Obinna, who now sits quietly in his favorite chair, pretending to be weak, wrapped in a blanket that hides his strength. "You should rest," she says coldly, her tone carrying both care and accusation. He only nods, watching her move, graceful, restrained, a queen who no longer loves her throne. The servants, however, carry the only warmth left in the house. Mama Titi hums old hymns while mopping the marble floor. Moses, the driver, still waits by the gate each morning though the car hasn't moved in days. "We serve not because of salary," Mama Titi says softly to him, "but because of love." That is what they don't understand. Upstairs, Obinna overhears her words and feels his eyes sting. Late at night, when the house finally sleeps, Obinna sits by his window staring at the blurred skyline. The neon glow of Lagos reflects in his glass, mixing with his tears. His chest aches, not from illness, but heartbreak. He removes his gold wristwatch and places it beside his untouched pills. "Time," he murmurs, "you've been loyal, but they haven't." The tick of the clock feels louder than thunder. He remembers holding Adora as a child, teaching Chike how to tie his first tie, promising Ngozi a world of luxury. Now he wonders if all that gold only melted their hearts. When Moses's daughter falls ill, Obinna learns of it through whispers. Without a word, he pays the hospital bill in full. "Don't tell anyone," he instructs. The driver weeps, bowing low. "May the ancestors remember your kindness," he says. But Obinna turns away, ashamed of how small his good deeds feel compared to his lies. Meanwhile, in a hidden corner of the mansion, Adora, Chike, and Ngozi gather around a lawyer. They speak in low tones. "If he's really dying," Chike says, "we need to move fast." Adora nods. "Before that will gets changed." Their lawyer hesitates. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Ngozi's cold gaze meets his. "Just draft it." From the kitchen doorway, Mama Titi listens, her heart breaking with every word. When the lawyer leaves, she confronts Adoora, trembling. Ungrateful children dig graves with golden spoons, she warns. Adoora scoffs. You think you can talk to me like that? Mama Titi steps closer. I raised you when your mother couldn't. You have forgotten love. Outside, the city lights flicker. Chike makes calls, selling one of his father's companies behind closed doors. The deal goes through quickly. Money flows like dirty water. In cafes and clubs, people gossip, the prince is already selling the king's crown. Obinna hears of it through an old friend. He says nothing. That night, he watches his son's betrayal play across the television like a silent film. His eyes dim, his breath shallow. The camera of his life pans slowly across his empire, walls of glass, halls of silence, hearts turned to stone. By evening, Lagos glows orange under a hazy sunset. The streets hum with life, children laughing, vendors shouting, buses honking, the music of a city that never mourns. Inside the mansion, however, silence reigns. Obinna sits alone, watching the sky darken. His reflection fades from the glass, replaced by the twinkling city lights that once symbolized hope. Now they look like candles flickering over the grave of love. The storm he planted has bloomed fully, not in thunder or fire, but in silence. As the night deepens, he whispers to himself, now I know what kind of love money buys. The camera pulls back slowly, Lagos alive outside, but inside, a kingdom quietly dying. Under the golden chandelier, the room shimmered with false warmth. The glass walls revealed Lagos breathing in neon and rain beyond, but inside, time felt suspended. Perfume, money, and quiet hostility thickened the air. Adoora's diamond bracelet caught the light as she crossed her legs, while Chike's eyes darted to the folder on the center table. Ngozi sat rigidly beside him, her geli perfectly tied, her silence sharper than judgment. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his calm presence cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. Even the air conditioner hummed nervously, as if aware of the storm about to unfold. Every heart in the room beat to the rhythm of expectation, a gathering not of family, but of predators waiting for their portion of a king's carcass. Fake smiles blossomed like poisoned flowers. Daddy, you look so much better, Adoora whispered, her lips trembling with sincerity she didn't mean. Obinna smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the city skyline reflected in the glass. Chike poured himself champagne, his movements precise, rehearsed, a man masking fear with control. To father's health, he said dryly, raising his glass. The clink that followed was hollow, echoing against marble and memory. The mansion felt smaller that night, its grandness suffocating rather than comforting. Beneath the crystal lights, love was no longer a bond, it was a performance, and every actor knew their lines too well. The lawyer cleared his throat. Shall we begin? His tone carried the authority of neutrality. He opened the folder, the papers whispering secrets as they shifted. Adoora leaned forward, her perfume filling the space between her and greed. Chike checked his watch, pretending disinterest. Mama Titi, standing silently in the corner, clutched her rosary with worn fingers. Her eyes moved from one familiar face to another, searching for remnants of the love she once cooked for, cleaned for, prayed for. But all she saw were strangers in designer clothing, hiding hunger behind sophistication. Before the first word could be read, Obinna lifted his trembling hand. Stop, he said softly, yet the word carried like thunder through still air. Every head turned. The lawyer froze mid-sentence. Adoora blinked in confusion. Obinna rose slowly, his frame frail but unbroken. His breathing was uneven, but his gaze, deep, burning, unflinching, commanded silence. He looked at each of them as if seeing ghosts where family once stood. No more lies, he whispered. His words carried the weight of 20 years of unspoken truth, cracking through the glossy walls of deception. I was never sick. His voice broke as the truth bled into the room. For a heartbeat, silence stretched, then chaos followed. Adora's glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the floor. Chike's jaw tightened, his face draining of color. Ngozi's eyes widened, her lips parting but no sound emerging. I wanted to know who would love me when I had nothing, Obinna continued, his voice trembling. When the cars stopped, when the money slept, when the empire turned to dust, who would still call me father? His gaze lingered on Adora, then Chike, then Ngozi. The words landed heavier than any illness. The room felt colder, smaller. Every heartbeat was a drum of guilt. Thunder cracked outside, splitting the Lego sky into jagged veins of light. Rain began to pour, streaking the glass walls like the city itself was weeping. The chandelier flickered. Inside, another kind of storm brewed, one born of betrayal, shame, and pride. Adora buried her face in her palms, the sound of her sobs competing with the rain. But her tears carried no repentance, only humiliation. Mascara streamed down her face, painting trails of vanity undone. How could you do this to us? She cried. Do what? Obinna asked calmly. Tell the truth. His tone was both weary and sharp, the tone of a man done pretending. Chike slammed his glass onto the table. You played God, father. His voice shook with fury. You wanted to test us like we were your servants. Do you know what people said when they heard you were dying? Do you know how it felt to beg investors to believe in me again? His breath came fast. You made me a fool. Obinna looked at him, not as a father defending himself, but as a man recognizing his own reflection in his son's pride. You did not need my sickness to become who you are, he said softly. You only needed your own heart. That single sentence struck harder than any slap. Ngozi stood abruptly. Enough. Her voice broke. You think you are the victim? All these years, I stayed by your side while you loved your businesses more than your family. Her geli slipped as she stormed toward the door. Now you call us liars. You call me a stranger. Her words dissolved into a scream that the thunder swallowed. Her heels clicked violently against the marble until she disappeared down the corridor, leaving the echo of a woman whose pride had finally cracked open. The thunder roared again, deep, rumbling, final. Lightning illuminated their faces, exposing every lie, every mask, every silent sin. It felt like judgment itself had descended upon the mansion. The ancestors, unseen but felt, seemed to breathe through the storm. The chandelier swayed gently, its crystals trembling like frightened souls. Obinna's breathing grew shallow. He reached for the edge of the table but missed. His knees buckled, the room spinning around him. Daddy! Adora screamed as he collapsed. The gold watch slipped from his wrist, spinning across the floor until it clattered to a stop, time surrendering at last. Chike froze, his anger dissolving into horror. Call someone, he shouted. But his voice cracked like glass. Daddy, please. Adora knelt beside him, shaking his shoulders, her sobs uncontrolled. Don't leave me. I'm sorry. But it was unclear whether she meant it or feared the silence that followed. Chike fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling. We need an ambulance, he yelled, pacing. Mama Titi was already on her knees, rosary in hand, her voice rising in Igbo prayer. Chukwu, Biko, Cheta Ebra, God, have mercy. Her tears fell freely, cutting paths down her wrinkled cheeks. Minutes blurred into sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against the rain-soaked windows. Neighbors gathered on their balconies, whispers floating like smoke. The same city that once envied this family now watched their undoing with quiet fascination. The paramedics rushed in, their wet boots squeaking on marble. He's still breathing, one of them said. Let's move. The stretcher wheels squealed as they carried Obinna toward the door, his head tilted to one side, eyes half closed, like a man still trying to stay awake long enough to forgive. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. White walls replaced chandeliers. The hum of machines replaced whispers of wealth. Adora sat in silence, her phone screen dark. Chaik stared at the floor, his hands clasped. Ngozi stood by the window, her reflection ghostly against the dim fluorescent light. None of them spoke of inheritance anymore. The lawyer's folder lay forgotten in a corner chair, soaked at the edges from the rain. For the first time, the room felt equal, stripped of power, name, and pride. Obinna lay unconscious, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. A single tear slid down from the corner of his eye, catching the faint light from the monitor. The beeping was steady, fragile, like the rhythm of a heart that had carried too much. Mama Titi sat by his bedside, whispering prayers only the ancestors could hear. Adora reached for her father's hand, her fingers trembling as if afraid of forgiveness. Chaik looked up, his eyes glistening. He was only trying to see love, he murmured. The monitor continued its quiet song, a steady, humble reminder that even broken hearts can still beat when truth finally breathes. Outside, Lagos continued to glow, restless, alive, and unaware of the small redemption flickering inside that hospital room. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a city cleansed but unchanged. Inside, however, something shifted. Pride had fallen. Greed had been silenced. And love, the one thing money could never buy, had finally found its way home through pain. The night drew to a close, carrying with it a story the city would never hear, the story of a father who pretended to die, only to teach his family how to truly live. The steady hum of machines filled the white hospital room, soft and rhythmic like a lullaby. Obinna's eyelids fluttered open, and for the first time in weeks, light found his weary eyes. His vision blurred at first, then slowly focused on the quiet figures beside him. Adora sat closest, her face stripped of makeup, her fingers clasped tightly around his frail hand. Chaik sat rigidly by the window, his eyes red but proud as ever, pretending not to watch. Ngozi, wrapped in a plain shawl, whispered softly under her breath, a prayer, or maybe an apology. The silence between them was new, not cold, not distant, but sacred. For once, there were no raised voices, no buzzing phones, no hollow laughter. Just the sound of a family rediscovering itself, one heartbeat at a time. Days passed and the air in the room softened. Gone were the designer perfumes and loud arguments. Adora learned how to fold the hospital bedsheet properly, how to wipe her father's forehead with a towel dampened in humility. Chaik helped him sit up and drink water, adjusting his blanket as though making up for years of emotional absence. Ngozi prayed before every meal, her voice trembling with sincerity. The walls that once held judgment now absorbed forgiveness. There was no need for grand apologies, their silence was enough. In that quiet, love breathed again, fragile but alive. When Obinna was finally strong enough to return home, Adora surprised everyone. She walked into her studio, the one once filled with ring lights, makeup palettes, and vanity mirrors, and unplugged everything. Enough pretending, she whispered to herself. One by one, she deleted her influencer accounts, each click releasing a ghost of who she used to be. A week later, the same studio became an office, small, bright, and filled with handwritten letters from young girls. A signboard outside read, "The Obinna Foundation." For the first time, Adora smiled without filters. Her followers were gone, but her purpose was born. Chaik's change was quieter but deeper. The corporate suit stayed folded in his wardrobe, untouched. One morning, he packed a single bag and drove east toward the village where his father was born. There, among red earth and mango trees, he found what Lagos had stolen from him, peace. He rebuilt his father's old school, painting the cracked walls himself, teaching children who laughed louder than any boardroom applause. "This is what legacy means," he whispered to a student one day, watching her trace her name in chalk. Sweat ran down his face, but his heart was lighter than ever. At home, Ngozi's transformation was softer, almost invisible at first. The bitterness that once stained her tone melted away. She began to cook again, not for status, but for family. She hummed the old love songs she used to sing when Obinna was still courting her. Every plate she placed before him was an offering of peace. When she cleaned his reading glasses or adjusted his pillow, her fingers trembled not from resentment, but from memory. She had forgiven him, and in doing so, found herself again. Weeks later, when Obinna could finally walk, he asked to see the city. Wrapped in a simple brown agbada, he stepped out into the Lagos sunlight, his cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement. The air was thick with diesel and life. Children chased tires through puddles, market women called out prices between laughter, a preacher shouted hope from a street corner. For the first time in a long while, Obinna saw Lagos not as a battlefield for wealth, but as a breathing organism, flawed, noisy, and beautiful. He paused near a crossroads where street drummers played under an overpass. Their rhythms were wild and alive, echoing through his chest. Vendors called blessings over roasted corn, taxi drivers argued over change, and yet in all the noise, Obinna heard something pure, the pulse of Africa itself. It wasn't just the beat of drums, it was the heartbeat of resilience, forgiveness, and second chances. Africa never stops teaching, he murmured, smiling faintly. As he continued his walk, he stopped by a cracked wall where someone had painted a mural. It was his own face, slightly faded by rain, beside the words, "Love is wealth." He stood there a long time, his reflection merging with the art. "Whoever painted this," he said softly, "understood what I took too long to learn." He reached out and traced the letters with his fingertips. Legacy, he realized, wasn't built on gold or companies, it was carved into hearts, not walls. That evening, back in his study, Obinna opened an old leather journal, the same one he used decades ago to plan his empire. The pages smelled of dust and memory. Slowly, with shaky hands, he wrote, "When the gold fades and the noise dies, love is the only empire that endures." His handwriting trembled, but his spirit was calm. He closed the journal, pressing it against his chest as though sealing the truth inside him. Outside, the dusk wrapped Lagos in hues of gold and deep blue. The camera of imagination would pan upward from the Okafor mansion, no longer a monument of arrogance, but of rebirth. The city lights flickered like candles, gentle and forgiving. It was as if the ancestors themselves were watching, their whispers carried in the evening wind. Morning came with soft light pouring through half-drawn curtains. Obinna sat by the window, a cup of tea in his hands, his face weathered yet peaceful. The city hummed behind him, car horns, laughter, life, and for the first time, he didn't feel above it. He felt part of it. Every breath he took was a quiet prayer of gratitude. In that stillness, his voice echoed, calm, wise, and eternal. To love is to live twice. The words seemed to float through the mansion, seeping into its walls, its silence, its very soul. The mansion stood still, no longer a kingdom of greed but a temple of lessons learned. Outside, the world moved on, but the Okafor name found new meaning, not in luxury, but in grace. The empire endured, reborn not in gold, but in love that had been tested, broken, and mended again by time itself.